Lydia is just so cute. The voice becomes clear as the door opens, and at that name coming from Quinn's mouth, I froze. I wondered who it could be, but hearing that name confirmed it. The woman's voice was indeed my sister. Like Quimby foolishly kept calling Lyd's name over and over. Shivering, I snapped to my senses. I realized I had to capture the scene on video, so I firmly recorded the evidence on my smartphone and quietly left the spot. After a while, the two of them came out of the bedroom. Seeing me, they turned pale, and I said, "That's right, I sent the video of you two to Gabriel anyway. Let's discuss what to do next among the four of us." Soon at those words, Lyd's face turned even paler. What do you mean? Just what it sounds like. I've got the video as evidence. What have you done? As I held up my smartphone. My sister became utterly frantic, and then she lunged at me. "My name is Linny, a 45-year-old housewife. I have twin boys who are in the 6th grade of elementary school. The kids are twins. I've heard that twins run in families. And indeed, I am a twin myself. I have a twin sister named Lai, being identical twins. We never really felt like sisters. Rather, we were more like rivals. Even if we weren't twins, it might have been the same. But I grew up always being compared to Lee. Before long, I harbored a strong complex towards Lai, and she in turn placed utmost importance on surpassing me. Lee was always the cute and affable child. On the other hand, I was always the shy and reserved one. And because I was also a bit of an introvert, everyone's attention naturally gravitated towards Lai whenever we met someone new. Even though we were rivals, I deeply adored Lai. Her ever-smiling face and popularity were something I aspired to. But it seems Lai didn't feel the same way. We used to play together a lot when we were in elementary school, but I was always stuck with the roles. Nobody wanted Lenny, is it? When nobody wanted to be it in a game of tag, I was always the one forced into the role. Even when one of our friends suggested deciding by rock, paper, scissors, Lighty would pressure me, saying, "You to do it right, Linny." Not wanting to be disliked by Lighty or left out, I had no choice but to agree. Lai's manipulative behavior wasn't just limited to playtime. It was in 6th grade. We were deciding roles for a school play. We were going to perform Snow White, and I, not being much of an actress, hoped to be the narrator. But I caught a cold and had to miss school on the day of role assignments. "Lenny wants to be the narrator. I'll tell the teacher for you." Lee said she'd pass on my wishes, so I trusted her and felt relieved. However, when I returned to school after recovering, I was shocked to find out I had been cast as the lead role. "Why am I the lead?" I asked a friend in disbelief. And then came the unbelievable reply. Lai said you wanted to be the lead. What? I didn't say that. But it's already been decided. It seems that as we were entering puberty, no one wanted to take on the potentially embarrassing lead role of Snow White. So I, the quiet girl who was absent, was chosen. The teacher found it odd that I, usually so reserved, had expressed a desire to take the lead role. Did Lenny really say that? The teacher had even checked with Lai. Truly, she wants to, but she's too shy to volunteer. Please let this be an opportunity for Linnea to shine. But Lighty recommended me as if it was all in my best interest. I cried, insisting I couldn't do it and didn't want to. However, everyone else's roles had already been assigned, chastised by teachers and parents alike. I somehow managed to pull through thanks to that effort. The play was a huge success. Teachers, parents, and friends all praised me. But amidst all this, only Lai looked on, displeased. Anyone could have done that. Getting all that praise for such a little thing is just silly. And so she began to openly resent me. That was the moment I truly felt Lyd's dislike. After that, she stopped inviting me to play. At first, it was painful. But once I realized I was no longer being forced into unpleasant roles, I made other friends and started enjoying myself. In middle school, many didn't even know Lighty and I were twins. We had become so distant, hardly speaking at school, and didn't look likey at all. We requested not to be in the same class, and I was enjoying my own life. But then one day, as I was studying for high school entrance exams, Lighty approached me. "Studying? Have you decided which high school you're applying to?" "Yeah, thinking of going for a high school." A high school was the newest and closest school to our house, boasting a competitive entrance difficulty. I had been working hard for 3 years because I really wanted to get into that school. But Lee, unaware of my efforts, laughed when she heard my choice of high school. Hey, high school, you've got to be kidding, right? Why don't you just go to be high school with me? It sounds like you wouldn't even need to study much for that. Lady always managed to bend me to her will, but I didn't want her dictating my choice of high school too. For the first time, I stood up to her. I've decided to go to a high school. You don't know if it's impossible for me. If you don't want to study, that's fine, but don't get in my way. I turned away from her and went back to my textbook. What that tone to your older sister? Angered by my response, Lee grabbed my textbook and threw it on the floor. What are you doing? Even if you study, it's a waste. You know you're destined to be my slave and go to be high school together. That day we ended up in a physical fight. Our parents came running when they heard the commotion and PPS apart. But by then my textbook was torn to pieces. But more than that, my heart was shattered by hearing Lai's true feelings about me to Lee. I was just a convenient target for all the unpleasant things. Realizing that Lady saw me as her slave was a clear awakening. But I didn't give up on studying. Fortunately, my parents contacted the school for me, and I got a new textbook. With my parents' support, Lee no longer interfered with my studies, and I was able to dedicate myself to them and successfully got into my chosen school. As she had initially declared, Lady barely studied for the exams and went on to be high school. Thus, we went to different high schools, pursued our education at different universities, and eventually started our careers. As an adult, I began living on my own. And that's when I met a man. He was my husband. Quimby and I were hired at the same time and felt a closeness. Because we were from the same area, when he asked me out, I felt like I was dreaming. I actually like you, Lenny. I'd be happy if you'd go out with me. Hearing those words made me incredibly happy. I had feelings for Quimby too, but I had never had the courage to admit such feelings openly. I wasn't pretty like Lai, and having had almost no experience with love during my school days, I could hardly believe he felt the same way about me. I'd be happy to thank you. Being in a relationship for the first time made me feel overjoyed. Since we started dating, I've been doing my best to make him happy, cooking meals and preparing lunchboxes for him. Quimby started visiting my apartment more often, and we began a life almost like we were living together. Lenny, I'll cook dinner tonight, but it wasn't just me doing things for him. Quimby was also very cooperative with household chores. Doing chores together was fun, and I began to think we could make a good married couple. 3 years into our relationship, we decided to get married. I was overjoyed and very happy about it. But there was one thing that worried me. You're a twin, right? I'd like to meet your sister. Quimby brought it up. During the 3 years we were dating, I had told him that I have a twin sister, but I had never introduced him to Lee. I hadn't even told her about having a boyfriend. Since that big fight in middle school, there had been a deep rift between us. Yeah, that's right. But if we were getting married, it was inevitable that Lady and Quimby would meet. The thought of how Lady might scorn us made me anxious, but I knew I had to introduce them at some point. What married? Since when? And when I finally called Lai after a long time, she seemed surprised by my news and raised her voice. I had told my parents, but it seems Lady hadn't heard about it yet. She sounded like this was news to her. Yeah, and I want to introduce Lady to the man I'm going to marry. I'm busy, you know. Well, if you insist, I guess I could meet him. Lee was as condescending as ever, so I asked her to make some time for us. Lee hadn't changed since we were kids. I figure I had to be the adult and humble myself. We went back home to meet Lee on her day off. Quimby suggested we all have a meal together with our parents, so we arranged to meet at a restaurant, and then on the day we went to the restaurant. But even when the time came, Lady didn't show up. Lid's late. I thought she said she'd be on time. Sorry, Quimby, don't worry about it. She'll show up eventually. Let's just wait a bit longer. Both my parents and I felt bad for keeping Quimby waiting. 15 minutes past the scheduled time, Lay showed up in a flashy dress. Sorry, did you wait? We did. What's with the outfit? Well, it's kind of like a meet and greet, right? Thought I should dress up. I couldn't help but be exasperated by her. Not just me, but our parents just gave a wry smile if she knew it was a meet and greet. I wish she hadn't been late without even messaging, especially not for the sake of getting dressed up. Seemed immature for an adult. but wanting to keep the peace, I swallowed my words. We introduced Lighty and Quimby to each other. Wow, Lenny, you've snagged a good-looking one working at the same place. Means he must be earning well. Lee made several rude remarks to Quimby on their first meeting. What do? Was deeply shocking. Why don't you marry Lee? Then she even said you were handsome. When I snapped back like that, he hurriedly apologized. Sorry. It was just a joke. I'm glad I met Lenny. And I don't have any special feelings for Lie. Then you shouldn't say things that praise Lee and put me down. It was a joke. Quimby apologized like that. I was shocked. But I wasn't going to call off our engagement over something like this. I just hoped he understood. Right after that he said, but Lady is a nice girl. It's not good to be jealous of your sister. Let's all get along as a family. Now we're adults. Things are different than they were. I had my reservations. But I knew our parents wanted Lenny and me to get along. But I wanted Quimby to be on my side. Why was he trying to bring me and Lie closer? But it's not like we'd be interacting much anyway. Arguing seemed too troublesome, so I just nodded along to Quimby's words. A few days later, I got a message from Lee. Isn't Quimby too good for you? Should I take him off your hands? I was chilled by her message. What are you talking about? I replied instinctively, and she called immediately. Just what I said. It's unbelievable someone as dull as Lenny will get married before me. Lee insulted me over the phone and laughed. He's high-earning and well-educated. Why not hand him over to me? We're twins. We've always shared everything. Don't say stupid things, I yelled back at Lee. I couldn't stand Quimby being treated like an object, nor the notion that we had always shared everything. That's ridiculous. I was always just someone for Lie to dump the things she didn't want on. That night I told Quimby about this, warning him to be careful around Lie. But Quimby seemed to take it lightly, laughing off my words. It's nice to be liked that much. Don't worry, Lid's not serious. It's not funny. You don't know what Lie might do. Do you doubt my feelings? It's okay. Because I said it's okay despite him being such a wonderful person. I felt like Quimby had changed after meeting Lie. Quimby would affirm everything when it came to Lee, just because she's my sister, other than that he was the same wonderful partner as always. But I was dissatisfied with how he changed whenever Lie was involved. Don't worry so much. But as Quimby said, if he himself didn't sway, there was nothing Lie could do. Feeling unsettled by her words was proof I hadn't fully trusted Quimby. So I was admonished. Indeed, he was right. I decided to trust Quimby and ignore Lee's words. Even afterward, Lie sent me spiteful messages, but I never replied. Fortunately, Lee didn't interfere with us, and I prayed we could become wonderful sisters while leading a happy married life. Years went by. After I turned 40, my parents told me that Lighty had gotten married. By then I had blocked her and wasn't in contact. Although we occasionally saw each other at our parents' home, Lee would insult me. Being nearly 40 and still unmarried, Lighty had become resentful towards me, and it seemed she was avoiding me as well. I thought Lee, being quite picky, wouldn't marry, but I was genuinely glad for her. When I heard she had found someone, I realized how terrible I had been. When Lighty got married, only after I got married myself. Moreover, through my parents, Lighty apologized to me after that. We started communicating again. Indeed, Lee had changed, becoming much calmer than before. It was as if she had returned to the Lydia I once loved. I never thought the day would come when Lie and I could laugh together again, so I was very happy. Lee even introduced me to her husband. He was about 5 years our senior, named Gabriel. He seemed to care for Lie deeply, which reassured me, having both married Lydia, and I became closer. Our parents were very happy to see us getting along. I wanted to make up for the time we had spent apart. Then a few years later, something happened. I became ill at work and had to leave early. I wanted to inform Quimby, but he was out on business. So I left a message with a colleague. I went straight home. Upon entering the house, I immediately sensed something was off. It felt like there was someone inside, even though the house was supposed to be empty. Could it be a burglar? That thought flashed through my mind. As I quietly entered, listening closely, I could hear noises and voices coming from the bedroom. As I stood silently in front of the bedroom, I recognized Quimby's voice coming from inside, but I couldn't bring myself to speak up. The nature of his voice strained the blood from my face. It was unmistakably the sound of an intimate moment. The creaking of the bed confirmed my fears. I didn't need to see inside to know what was happening. And my hands trembled. However, if Quimby was cheating, I had to catch him in the act. With that thought, I carefully opened the door with my smartphone in hand, ready to record what I saw inside the bedroom. Was even more shocking. Lydia is really cute, isn't she? The voice became clearer as the door opened. Hearing Quimby say her name, I froze. Now that he mentioned it, the female's voice was indeed Liz. Quimby kept foolishly repeating Li's name. Trembling, I recorded the scene and quietly left. I sat in the dining area in shock. For a while I was supposed to be home early due to feeling unwell, but that shock made me forget my illness. Staring blankly at my phone, I just waited for this nightmare to end. Then a few minutes later, the bedroom door opened. I'll head back to work now, so lock up, said a voice. Okay, it'd be nice if we could live together soon. Hearing this, I hurriedly stood up, noticing the noise. Quimby and Lighty saw me in the hallway. Linny, why are you here? Quimby exclaimed, turning pale. Why, this is my house, right? But why is Lee here? Aren't you both supposed to be at work? Li looked away for a moment, but then smirked defiantly. Why do you think you wanted it from my own mouth? Didn't you, Lee? Quimby tried to stop her, but Lee wouldn't be silenced. I've always hated how you look down on me. Happiness and Quinny don't suit you. I'll take everything with that, Lee declared. I just smiled at her words. Is that so? Then I'll give you Quimby. Linny, but don't think you can take my happiness. Lee seemed annoyed by my retort, glaring at me. To that I continued, addressing her directly. Yeah, I sent the video to Gabriel. Let's discuss this as a group of 4 sometime soon. Lee's face turned pale instantly. What do you mean? Just what I said. If you want Quimby, Gabriel should know about this, shouldn't he? What have you done? Li lunged at me. Lee, calm down. How can I calm down? Quimby tried to stop her, but Lee was beyond reason. Just then the smartphone inside Lid's bag rang. At that sound, Li froze in place. Looks like Gabriel's calling, isn't it? Lee, pale-faced, hesitantly looked at her bag, but there was no sign of her answering the call. In the silent room, only the sound of the phone echoed. After a while it stopped ringing, and then my phone rang. See, since Lee didn't answer, now he's calling me. Linny, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive Lee. Can you somehow cover for her with Gabriel? If not, Lee will lose everything. Quimby started making statements as if to protect Lighty. Li, standing next to him, began to sob bitterly, as if she were the tragic heroine. What Quimby said made sense. Actually, Gabriel is not only Lid's husband, but also the president of the company where she works. If Gabriel learns about Lid's infidelity, divorce talks might start, and she might not be able to continue working at his company, especially now during work hours. There's no room for sympathy, though it seems harsh. She did this knowing full well she could lose everything. I can't cover for her. I said that that's too harsh. Quimby, as usual, tried to defend Li. His words infuriated me, and I glared at Quimby, worried about her, thinking Lee is the only one who's going to lose her family and job. Is a huge mistake. At my shout, Quimby flinched, then started sweating profusely. It was as if he suddenly came to his senses, starting to break out in a cold sweat. He must have understood the meaning of my words. Just so you know, I've also sent the video to the company's main email address, including your department and name. What have you done? By then Gabriel's call had ended. Quimby and Li stood frozen with a look of despair. After kicking them out, I called Gabriel. Sorry to disturb you all. Work. It's about the video, right? Yes. It involves Quimby, doesn't it? Yes, yes, I replied to Gabriel's gentle voice. I'm sorry for asking this of you. He said that actually Gabriel had consulted me because he felt something was off with Lee. It might have been plausible for the old Li, but the current lady truly loved Gabriel. I didn't think she would cheat, and I had conveyed as much to Gabriel. But just in case, he had asked me to gather evidence if Lighty did something questionable. That's why I think I was able to film calmly. Please don't apologize. I'm glad I could capture evidence of Quim's infidelity. If you hadn't asked me, I probably wouldn't have thought to do so. Calmly, I told Gabriel. It would be a lie to say I wasn't shocked. It's shocking enough to discover an affair, let alone with one's own sister. I had every right to be angry. My sons will be home soon, so let's talk another time, I told Gabriel, and hung up. Tears flowed endlessly, but for my sons and for my own future, I knew I had to be strong that day. I went about my usual routines. And when the kids had settled down for the night, Quimby came home. "Were you with Lighty?" I asked him, and Quimby, clearly in a bad mood, snapped back at me, "I got called into HR because of you. The decision on my punishment will come later. What are you going to do about this?" The way Quimby turned the blame on me, making me out to be the villain, despite his actions, made me almost laugh. Crying over such a man was a waste of time. There's nothing to be done. Do as you please. You understand the situation, right? If we divorce, I'm taking the kids. Still want to divorce. His attempt to use our sons as leverage was pathetic. And I told him, "So what are you talking about? You think you'll get custody after likely losing your job? Divorce is a foregone conclusion. Stop being ridiculous." Quimby had nothing to say. Of course, getting caught in adultery during work hours, dismissal seemed inevitable. Was he still so clueless about the gravity of his actions? If that's the case, then he's incredibly foolish. I'll be leaving tomorrow. Wait a minute, can't we consider starting over? Can't you forgive just one affair? Quimby, now taking a submissive stance, began apologizing to the assertive me. "One time," I asked back. According to Gabriel, Lee's behavior had been odd for several months. Given Gabriel's job involves mostly being out for sales, there's a good chance she might have been returning home like this. "Just one," Quimby responded weakly to my question, his eyes darting around from the lack of confidence in his answer. It was clear it wasn't just once. It felt ridiculous to pursue it any further, so I dropped the subject. The next day, I told my sons about Quim's infidelity. They are in 6th grade, now old enough to understand that hurting and betraying others is wrong. I apologize for having such a conversation at this sensitive time in their lives. And they said they wanted to talk it over alone and went to their room. After just a few minutes, they came out with their bags packed and said, "We're on your side, Mom." I couldn't help but cry. The boys laughed and comforted me as I apologized again. Then we went back to my parents' house. My parents were speechless when they heard about Lai and Quimby's actions. Despite being happy that we had become close as sisters again, I felt sorry, but Mom apologized to me, crying, "Lee hasn't changed. After all, I'm sorry for always making you endure." Her cut ties with both Lighty and Quimby. "We will keep our distance from Lighty to the bare minimum," Dad said. And I felt relieved. From that day, I started commuting to work from my parents' home. Quimby, perhaps on suspension, didn't come to the office, but called me multiple times instead, ignoring him. As I didn't have time to deal with it, he began to send messages day and night. "I love you, Lenny. Let's live happily as a family of 4 again." I was insane. I was just deceived by that woman. "I don't know how to live without you, Lenny." Perhaps these were what you'd call Romeo emails. I was almost fooled for a moment, but thanks to my sons laughing uselessly at those messages, I realized how ridiculous they were. However, I couldn't ignore him forever. Eventually, I had to meet him to sign the divorce papers. I made plans to meet Quimby at a cafe on my day off. Choosing to meet at a cafe instead of going home was Gabriel's advice. He said that being in a public place would help keep the conversation calm. When Gabriel and Lighty arrived at the cafe together, Lighty had become so thin in just a few days. She looked like a different person. She must have fallen out of favor with Gabriel. "Serves her right now. Both Lighty and Quimby, please sign the divorce papers." It seemed Lighty was also reluctant to divorce, to the two hesitating to sign. Quimby said, "It's a misunderstanding, Gabriel. It's your choice to divorce. But we won't." "Are you still saying that my sons and I no longer consider you family?" I retorted. I addressed Quimby's desperate attempts. Gabriel sighed deeply and said, "You could go to court, but it's clear you'll lose considering the alimony and legal fees for the divorce trial." "Can you afford it?" "Alimony for the divorce trial, of course. You both betrayed your families, Lee to me and Lenny. Quimby, you'll have to pay us a proper settlement in the divorce trial." Lee started trembling silently. Her silence and weight loss now made sense. "What am I supposed to do? I might be fired. How can I pay?" Quimby began to argue, pale-faced. "You did this to yourself. Besides, you owe child support for both kids, right?" Lie at my words. Lee flinched. "You wanted to live together, right? You're welcome to have the house." I laughed loudly. "And don't forget the mortgage payments." Quimby was taken aback, probably having forgotten About the mortgage, both sat sweating pale and silent in front of the divorce papers. Later, Gabriel introduced me to a lawyer, and I managed to claim alimony and legal fees, and finalize the divorce. Quimby, who had resisted divorce so much, proposed to lie immediately after our divorce was finalized. I knew he had liked lie from the start. When did their affair turn serious? Hearing this, I felt nothing but disdain. Meanwhile, Lydie, who had genuinely loved Gabriel, was abandoned and eventually lost her job too. Why did she end up with Quimby, despite loving Gabriel so much? Remaining puzzled, I asked Gabriel about it. He hesitated before revealing. Actually, she started complaining about you a few months ago. Really? Complaining about how you, who were useless, got married and even have kids? It's extravagant, he explained. Could it really be because of that? I wondered, but considering Lai's personality, it wasn't impossible. Yet the thought that she went to such lengths just to set me up was horrifying. It was because I thought you might be in danger that I consulted Lenny, but I never imagined it would lead to this with Quimby. I'm truly sorry, Gabriel said apologetically. It's okay, it's over now, and Quimby is to blame for taking up Lid's invitation as well. That concluded our conversation. Gabriel and I agreed to keep in touch for updates on the divorce compensation and legal consultations. According to him, the two, burdened with a substantial amount of divorce compensation, ended up marrying and living together. Lydie was abandoned by her parents and had nowhere else to go. It seemed she reluctantly accepted Quimby's proposal because she had no family left. From what the lawyer told me, Lydie couldn't accept that she ended up divorcing Gabriel and marrying Quimby, whom she didn't love, because of me. The lawyer mentioned getting hurled with abusive language every time he called her. While I felt sorry for the lawyer, he continued to support me firmly, perhaps because of Gabriel's presence, and I couldn't be more grateful. For a while, we'll still have to make calls to demand the divorce compensation, and it seems I'll continue to rely on their support. 5 years passed. The divorce compensation and child support were being paid on time, and my emotional wounds had largely healed. One day, after a long period of calm, the lawyer contacted me. Lydie says she has something to talk to you about. I refused, knowing her. It would likely end up with her using me as a verbal punching bag for stress relief. I decided never to trust or forgive Lydie again and asked the lawyer to convey my refusal. However, Lydie insisted it was urgent, and Quimby also requested a meeting on her behalf. Given their persistence, I reluctantly agreed. However, lacking the courage to meet them alone, I contacted Gabriel, feeling somewhat guilty for doing so. After such a long time, he gladly agreed to accompany me, and so I met with them. After a long while, Quimby and Lydie were sitting at the cafe with a solemn demeanor. When Lai saw my face, she looked slightly relieved. What's this about? Why did you call me here? I asked. And Lai said, actually, I've developed renal failure and need to undergo dialysis. I was taken aback. It's your fault. No, both of your faults that Lee ended up like this. She couldn't sleep without drinking alcohol, and yet, because of the divorce settlement pain, she had to work. Your actions have destroyed her health. Quimby angrily blamed us, but I thought it was their own doing. Gabriel seemed to agree as he sighed and looked exasperated. So what? I'm not reducing or refunding the divorce settlement. Be thankful I agreed to installments. I stood firm, and Lai, crying, lowered her head. I'll pay the divorce settlement. Please, I'm begging you, give me a kidney. What? I exclaimed loudly at her outrageous request. What are you talking about? There's no way I give it to you. When I refused, Quimby said you were born with a twin with Lai. For this reason, you have a duty to help her. What are you talking about? Who has been pushing all the unpleasant things onto me? Did Lee ever help me once in such situations? Don't talk about trivial matters. Lid's life is at stake here. Quimby angrily retorted. Lai began to cry and plead, apologizing. Quimby insulted me as heartless, pressuring me for the transplant, as if threatening at that moment, feeling as though I was being blamed. Gabriel spoke up. If she needs dialysis, then undergo dialysis. Do you understand how tough dialysis is? And do you understand how difficult a transplant is? Why should she risk her life for Lai? Their words left them speechless. I felt relieved with Gabriel's support and caught my breath. Moreover, Lee, you've repeatedly called Linny useless. Isn't it too convenient to ask for help only when you're in trouble? But that's Lighty, you've destroyed Linny's happy life. Linny has no obligation to save your life. Lighty broke down crying, and Quimby was at a loss for words. Both of them must have thought that I would surely give them a kidney if I had been alone. I might have been persuaded once again. Gabriel saved me. Take care then. Oh, and don't forget the transfer for this month's payment. With that I got up and left. Whether I'm called heartless or a devil, I cannot forgive them both. I don't know what kind of life they will lead from now on, but I hope they never forget what they did and reflect on it. It seems Quimby and Lee were both working part-time to make ends meet, but now that Lee can no longer work properly, their financial situation is dire. But that's their karma. Everything is the result of their actions. Their atonement won't end until they've paid the compensation ordered in the divorce settlement. I continue to live happily with my parents and sons. My parents no longer even mention Lid's name. However, it seems they are happy to see the twins getting along well. It's comforting to see a bond between my sons that Lydia and I never had. I continue to keep in touch with Gabriel frequently. He's a genuinely good person, always thoughtful and considerate. It appears he has developed feelings for me, but I'm not ready to reciprocate them at this time. I don't want to cause any more upset for my sons, but in a few years when they come of age, I hope to have the chance to think about my own happiness again.